Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being so patient with us as we figure out some Zoom technicalities. My name is Mariah Samji, and I am the Executive Director of IDEA. If you don't have yourself already muted and you are not a mayoral candidate, please do so. Well, let's see. There we go. All right, we got everyone. We're ready to rock and roll. All right, back to the intros. So my name is Mariah Samji. I'm the Executive Director of IDEA, the Infill Development in Edmonton Association. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we're on Treaty 6 territory within the Métis homeland and the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 4. We acknowledge this land as traditional territories for many First Nations, such as the Cree, Dene, Stoney, and Blackfoot. IDEA is a nonprofit organization created by industry and community members that saw that our neighborhoods were going through changes. As Edmonton's housing stock came up for renewal and our school populations in our mature neighborhoods dwindled, the IDEA community wanted to create vibrant and successful neighborhoods that gave options to all different types of people in the way they live, work, play, and move.
Sorry for that. I'm sorry. Could you say that one more time?
I'm just looking at the registration. I have wonderful people working on the back end that will be muting you if you have not muted yourself through the conversation. And to follow along on social media, follow the hashtag YegVote and YegInfill. I will pass it on to Chelsea to take over this panel.
Thank you, Mariah. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chelsea Jerzak. I am the president of IDEA, and I'd like to thank you so much for joining us today for IDEA's Mayoral Candidate Forum. We're very pleased to have here with us today 5 mayoral candidates: Kim Krischel, Michael Oshry, Diana Steele, Amarjeet Sohi, and Cheryl Watson. So IDEA does not endorse any candidate, and we invited all candidates running for mayor to join our forum here today. So the candidates who have chosen to attend are taking time out of their busy schedules specifically to be here with us and to tell us what they think about infill and urban redevelopment. So we're pretty excited to hear what they have to say. So just a quick reminder before we get going that by infill, we're not just talking about skinny houses, as infill is much, much broader than that. When we use the word infill, what we mean is the creative reuse or redevelopment of land or buildings in existing parts of the city. So with that definition in mind, I'm going to turn it over to our panelists to get their take on infill. So for each of you, I'm going to give you 1 minute to introduce yourself, and then you'll have 2 minutes for each subsequent question, and I will be timing you. Okay, so with no further ado, let's kick off with Kim Krischel. Kim, can you tell us who you are and why you're running for mayor? You have 1 minute.
Okay, now start my 1 minute because I needed to unmute. Thank you, Chelsea. You know, our city is at a pivotal point in time, and our next mayor will need to hit the ground running, have a real understanding of how our city works and what it's like to run a business, and I have that experience. I'm returning to politics because I care about our city and our future. I came to Edmonton for love, but I stayed because I fell in love with Edmonton. I've been building a very comprehensive plan for our city's future, but I want to be real. No platform can anticipate everything that our city and council will face over the next 4 years, and nor should it. So I think what you need to know as a voter is what you can expect from me as a mayor. I bring a balanced and bold approach, and I have a track record of getting things done for our city. And a vote for me is a vote for Edmonton. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, we'll go over to Michael Oshry.
Well, thanks, Chelsea, and thanks everybody for joining us. Appreciate everyone's time, of course. You know, I think the question on most people's mind is who's the best person to lead the city out of recovery, and especially economic recovery. If we don't get the economics of the city right, we're not going to have the resources to deal with all the big social challenges and infrastructure challenges and the other issues that the city has. And so we've got to get that right from the city. We've got to get it right, the economics right for the city, businesses and people working, and as well the economics right for the city government. And then we have to practically deal with all these social challenges that everyone's heard about during the campaign. And so that's a little bit about me. My quick themes of our campaign is around the economic recovery, Edmonton for Everyone, which deals with a lot of the social challenges, smaller infrastructure, which I think a lot of people here might be interested in learning more about on the call today, and then a better fiscal management at the administration. So I look forward to the discussion, and thanks again for having me.
Thank you so much. Okay, next we'll continue with Diana Steele.
So thank you so much for inviting all of the candidates to participate here today. I'm running for mayor of our city to offer Edmontonians a different kind of leader. I'm a believer in servant leadership. It is not about electing me as the mayor. It is about giving a voice to all Edmontonians through me. We need a compassionate, consistent, measured, and transparent leader who can rally a 1 million person team to make our city the best in the world. I am confident that the leadership I am offering to our city is unlike anything we have ever seen before. My top priorities are focused on solving social issues so we can create a strong and thriving city. Under my leadership, there will be no community left behind. Let me be your voice. Vote Steele on October 18th. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next, Amarjeet Sohi, over to you.
Well, first of all, I want to start by acknowledging that I am speaking with you from Treaty 6 territory. I believe that economic growth, social issues, climate change, and equity, and how we provide services at affordable and the lowest rate, these are interconnected issues. You can't build a thriving economy without healthy and resilient people. And you can't really build a thriving business without dealing with homelessness, addiction, mental health that cause disorder. And you can't tackle climate change by leaving people behind. My slogan for the city is simple: Edmonton for all of us, which means an opportunity to grow here, build our lives here, live in safety, and live in dignity. I look forward to having conversations with you.
Thank you. And last but not least, we have Cheryl Watson.
Hello. I'm a born and raised Edmontonian. I grew up on the north side and I love this city, but I know it can be better. And on top of that, COVID has changed everything. Now, I've honed my skills working for some of the most successful companies in the world at some of their most transformative times. IBM during Y2K and Intuit through their evolution from a desktop company to an online global software leader. And so I'm a change leader that brings the skills, financial and risk acumen that are really going to be necessary to lead our city forward out of COVID and beyond. My platform is based on three main platforms. The first is Place, to create a safe, welcoming, well-built, well-maintained city that we can all be proud of. Partnerships. The city of Edmonton is in a lot of lines of business right now that is not their own, and we need to focus on doing our own work and doing it really well. And the third is potential. We need to leverage our traditional industries and really lean into our strengths in technology and innovation and talent to really build our future economy. So,
thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you.
You will have another 2 minutes in just a moment. Okay, we are going to get into the meat and potatoes now of the questions. So for this first question, I'll start with Michael Oshry. Michael, can you tell us about your vision for the city and specifically how neighborhoods and transportation contribute to that vision?
Sure. 2 minutes, you said?
That's right. 2 minutes, starting now.
Starting now. So I'll start with my infrastructure plan. I think it's something that's pretty interesting. You know, we spent a lot of money as a city on really big infrastructure projects over the last decade, and we're not going to have the resources to continue a lot of that, but we can still make an impact to the city by doing smaller infrastructure, especially at neighborhood scale. And so we can put in 30, 40, 50 projects around the city in most neighborhoods using the local, EFCL, community leagues and the local counselor in the neighborhood to try to figure out what's best for them. So these are, bike parks, off-leash parks, playgrounds, all these sorts of things, which still cost a couple $1 million each. So it's not inexpensive, but we can do that and make a pretty substantial investment in our city while still being careful with the money. And these are things that communities have been asking for a decade or more. And so I'm pretty excited about that. We've also got a plan for West Rossdale, which needs some infill development. You know, we talk a lot about appropriate land where we can do some development, and, you know, having a meeting place down by the river is pretty interesting as well. Very excited about that. As far as the transportation side, my view on transportation and public transportation is that we have to continue investing in it. The West LRT is coming, so we've got to make it on time and on budget. But really, one of the interesting things for me is to make sure that the TOD sites get upzoned and get developed. You know, we have a history at our city of building these big train lines, but then when the land comes to get rezoned, city council kind of balks at it. And so we've got to enable all different types of upzoning and increased housing and commercial at these transit-oriented development sites, which helps pay the tax base. Obviously, helps pay for the LRT itself. But that's really one way to use this infrastructure for more than just transportation. And so I'm pretty keen on getting that all built out and approved. And I'm out of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that answer. Next, we'll go to Diana Steele. Again, the question is, please tell us about your vision for the city and specifically how neighborhoods and transportation contribute to that vision.
Well, my vision for the city is that we have to cut the head off the snake. So what that means is we have to work on solving houselessness right now, mental health concerns in the city, clean up crime before we can even focus on building a thriving city, which we all want to get to. We all want to get to a self-actualized city. But in order to get there, we need to partner with our private industry so that we can call on their social conscience mandates and have them help us build tiny homes on land that we have access to, and start taking care of those individuals in our city who are marginalized right now. And then we'll have a thriving city that we can focus on creating a strong and thriving economy. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we'll go to Amarjeet Sohi.
During my time on city council, I always pushed hard to ensure that transportation planning and land use planning go together. Because when we do that, we help build more thriving, more connected, and more compact communities. As a federal minister, we also made some changes to our programming to ensure that kind of integration was promoted and supported at city. Transit for me is not only a service that take you from place A to place B. Public transportation for me is a vehicle for social mobility, to find access to community, to find access to better jobs and opportunities. So integration of land use and transportation will always remain a big on my agenda. Another thing I want to talk about is the 15-minute communities. I have proposed the creation of districts where people live locally, buy locally, and come together to build that social cohesion and support local businesses. So I believe that choices are also important for people. And we also need to make sure that we are building sustainable modes of transportation for people to enjoy. And land use planning and zoning bylaws can help us do that, and the investments can help us do that. So that's my vision for transportation and infrastructure.
Thank you very
and
much.
if I have 10 seconds, I would say I'm the only candidate who has unwavering commitment to get the LRT done to west, to southwest, and eventually to Castlegrounds.
Thank you. Okay, Cheryl Watson, your 2 minutes will start now.
We know that neighborhoods really are how people identify with the city. They deliver the services that are closest to us. And I remember myself growing up in the community of Beverly and really relying on the programs and services that were delivered right there in our neighborhood. So we are doing a disservice to a number of neighborhoods within our city right now. The first areas that I would talk about are some of the land that the city of Edmonton is owning and holding on to, really restricting some of these neighborhoods to grow and thrive. And so I think specifically about the Blatchford lands, the exhibition lands, and these are in prime neighborhoods where housing is needed, housing is necessary, and they're in just really wonderful areas of the city. So the city of Edmonton needs to sell those lands, allow them to be developed and neighborhoods to be built. The second thing that I would offer is that we have some aging neighborhoods in this city, and we're really not getting the most out of the infrastructure that we originally invested in years ago. And so in my economic policy, I actually announced the waiving of infill development fees so that we can encourage and incentivize development in some of these aging communities. And so we would target some very specific communities that need investment and need evolution, and waive the development fees for developers willing to develop in those areas. Development, as I just said. And then the final thing around infrastructure, or transportation, I actually would love for us to start calling this mobility as a service. And we are seeing leading cities around the world that are really viewing transportation as a service, and how they actually are more reliant on combining transportation services. And right now we know in our city that DATs and buses are sorely underfunded. And so if we really think about how we're getting people around, that's an area we need to invest in.
Thank you. Okay. Lastly, we'll go to Kim Krischel to tell us about her vision for the city.
First of all, just a little bit about my history. When I was on city council, worked really hard and got support for what today is known as the Neighborhood Renewal Program. That program was a 10-year dedicated tax so that we could create enough funding so that we could fix every neighborhood when it came due. It was critical because if we wanted a vibrant and thriving downtown, we needed to fix all of the older neighborhoods in particular, which meant fixing their roads, their sidewalks, and the infrastructure underneath those neighborhoods. And that program today has actually fixed 237 of the 300 targeted neighborhoods. And it has really set the bar and allowed for infill developers to be able to sell infill developments in the older neighborhoods, because by transforming those neighborhoods, young people in particular have wanted to move into those older neighborhoods close to the downtown. And so I would continue by supporting and maintaining the Neighborhood Renewal Program so that we, again, can support infill development. And I have a plan. The city of Edmonton already has a plan for moving Edmonton forward. Some of that incorporates the 15-minute neighborhood concept. There'll be a lot of work for us to get there. Ironically, in some of the suburban developments, we have more 15-minute neighborhood than we do in the older areas. But I happen to live in a neighborhood that does have that. And I understand the benefits of it. I have in the past supported pretty much every infill development, if you look at my track record. And I believe it is important for us to continue in the direction of having infill and be creative in terms of the type of zoning that we allow for infill. Because the challenge that infill and young people have is that if they want to get an infill property, it's really expensive right now. And they need opportunity for basement suites and mother-in-law suites to happen a little easier for them as income properties for them to be able to make it work. So there's things that we can do in that regard. On the other side, I do think we need developers and infill developers to come together more with the communities, especially in some of the older areas where—
That is your 2 minutes, but I do have a specific question about that coming up, so you'll get a chance to answer.
Okay, I could have gone on that all, but obviously I like infill.
You'll have a chance. Okay, so next question, I'm going to start with Diana Steele this time. So the previous question was about your vision for the city. This question is about how you plan to achieve that vision. So tell us a little bit about the implementation tactics and tools that you would look to use as mayor.
Well, as mentioned, I'd like to partner more with private industry than the city has in the past. So typically there's this sort of us versus them mentality. And I think we all need to work together in order to achieve the goals that we have. We do have some, as I've mentioned, I'm quite passionate about the social concerns we have in the city here. I also see there's the business side and the economic side as well. But for me, I'm going to partner with business in a way we've never seen before. First of all, they have social conscience mandates. Most of them, they donate money every year. They have a minimum of volunteer hours, those kinds of things, but also just calling on people to step up where the other levels of government maybe are missing out right now. We don't have funding from the province and the feds like we would like to. So we have to find a way to take care of everyone within our city, the 1 million people who live here, and we need to be creative about the way we do that. So we need to think differently outside the box. So partnering with private is my main plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, next we'll go to Amarjeet Sohi. How do you plan to achieve your vision? Tell us about the tactics and tools that you would use.
No, I believe in getting things done. That's how I have worked for my time during council and my time during MP and minister. I deeply believe in collaboration. That's how I was able to bring forward a motion to get the LRT built to Millwoods when it was nowhere on city's agenda in 2007. I garnered support from council to move that project forward. That's how I brought together 129 indigenous communities to consult with on the Trans Mountain Pipeline Expansion Project, very controversial, politically charged project. The key to success is collaboration. Some people think that talking about collaboration is platitude. That's not what it is. Collaboration is actually a tool to get things done. And I have demonstrated that. At a local level, mayor's main responsibility is to work with council. And I have the experience, I have the knowledge and the demonstrated track record to do that. From the arena project, how we came and I worked together and many other council members worked together on that project, as well as on neighborhood renewal program and many other things. If a mayor cannot rally council together, we will not be successful. And it's a responsibility that I take very seriously in my role as a leader. And that's how I will govern, to put policies into tangible actions by working together with city council, city administration, with private sector, with the communities, all of us working together to build an Edmonton for all of us.
Thank you very much. Okay, next we have Cheryl Watson talking about implementation tactics and tools.
This is really about building a high-performing organization that is really committed to its customer, because it's really the administration that delivers on all of these visions for our city and the programs that are being delivered. Now, customer empathy is something that is really important, really understanding your customer. And so when I was at Intuit, we used some practices called Follow Me Home, where we would all have to go into someone's home, watch them use our tax product, and ourselves even use our own QuickBooks product to set up a company. Imagine if every City of Edmonton employee actually had to, every single month, try and use a different city service. Imagine if they were given a drawing of a new deck for a home and had to go down to the Edmonton Tower and get a building permit or a construction permit. And so really having our employees working with the city manager so that city employees can really walk a mile in their customers' shoes every single month and really have meaningful experiences of the services that they're delivering. That's an idea that I have for how we can create a culture that serves.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Kim Krischel, same question.
Well, I obviously answered that question previously. It's one of those days. I will say this, that I think we need a better balance between the infill developers working with the neighborhoods where infill's happening. I obviously support infill. Where I see some of the challenges is especially in neighborhoods where we haven't done a good job of understanding that when you have an infill coming in, that many of the older homes will be in the back of their properties. And so there needs to be a better coordination with working with those infill developers, and that they respect, you know, the fact that they do have neighbors that they're coming into an older area. So I think that there needs to be a better balance there. Certainly, one of the things that I was working on before I left City Council was a jurisdictional housing team from an enforcement perspective that could do a better job working with infill developers to ensure that the neighbors' concerns are addressed, such as, you know, issues with foundations and lot size and that kind of issue in terms of drainage. And so there needs to be a better job there. I do see opportunity within the city of Edmonton clearly to do more infill and would support that. But I also think that we need the infill developers to be respectful of those neighborhoods and architectural design. I think we could do a little bit better there than what we've been doing. When I was on council, we did not actually support mid-block development. That is in existence today. And so we need to really work hard to make that work for everybody. So that would be my response there. And just quickly on my vision for Edmonton, I do think we need an integrated transportation system with our city plan. And I do support looking at our on-demand service and tweaking where needed, since we have missing service for most of North Edmonton. And I have said publicly that I have supported LRT. I will be supporting moving forward with the West LRT line, although I'm quite concerned about the fact we don't have a rail car deal. So we have some challenging times ahead, but I do see opportunity for our city if we integrate our transportation with different modes and integrate with our city plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, last on this question is Michael Oshry.
I have a fundamental different answer than everybody on this question. I think the city needs to get out of the way and let the infill development community, within the rules, of course, of which there is many, 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 do what they do and build what they build. And right now we have this very large, big government overreaching, check the box mentality, and it makes it very expensive and very difficult to get anything done with the city and build anything. And the city's approach needs to be a bottom-up approach, totally different than what it is right now. And we have to go to the infill community and other communities. I say this to other businesses or other cultural groups or nonprofits and say, what do you want to build and how can we help you do there? How can we help you do it? How can we help you get there? That should be the city's role. And right now it's totally the opposite, where the city is stepping in and trying to make everything, maybe not purposely, but that's the results, is making it difficult as possible. And there's lots of rules in place. There's lots of regulations, especially on the infill side. I was on council when we started the whole process of allowing lot splitting and everything else. And so there's lots of opportunity for the infill community to do many, many interesting things, but the city has just got to get out of the way and let you all do what you do and make it as easy as possible. And again, I keep qualifying that by saying within the rules, we all know that, but to make it as easy as possible. And that's just not what's happening right now. There's also an issue with permitting. So I've got a plan to have default permitting, which is 30-day maximum. So if you're trying to do a development, you put in a development permit, you've done everything, you've got signed or stamped drawings, the city has to approve it or it's deemed approved by default within 30 days. And those are the kind of ways that we can really support the community and make sure that people can build without waiting for the city to get around to approving a development permit, as an example. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that answer. That was Michael Oshry. Okay, so for our next question, some of you have touched on this a little bit already in your previous answers, but this one is about change. So infill and urban redevelopment represent change, and change can make people pretty uncomfortable. So how will you deal with that as mayor? How will you balance community and industry priorities around infill and urban redevelopment? And again, when I'm saying the word infill, I'm not talking necessarily or exclusively about lot splitting or small scale development, but increasingly with the new city plan that's been approved, we're seeing medium scale development moving into areas along nodes and corridors that we haven't seen before. So the city is increasingly intensifying, and with that comes some pain. So how will you as mayor deal with that? I'm going to go over to Amarjeet Sohi first.
No, I believe in leading by example. So if we believe in infill, then we need to make sure that communities understand why that infill is important, why that development is important. I'll go back to my time on city council. In 2007, we had a number of sites that were being redeveloped, and these were surplus school sites to create a more affordable homes for first-time home buyers program. Great program. And I defended that program despite the opposition from the communities. But I also found a way to work with communities, to deal with their concerns, to bring them along. And I think that's the kind of approach we need to do. We need to be firm and we need to be consistent. And we also need to be compassionate. We also need to be empathetic to people's concerns. I think Edmontonians are willing and they can embrace change. are willing and they are actually embracing more infill, but we need to do it in a way that we talk the value of it and we instill why it is necessary. And that is why I will use my experience of past, how I've been able to do that and be consistent and firm, but also at the same time making sure that communities are involved. And that I think one more thing I want to add is that through my experience, I've learned the more upfront, thorough, and meaningful consultation that you can do with communities to bring them on board actually pays dividends in the later and makes projects more viable and get them done faster.
Thank you very much. Okay, next we'll go to Cheryl Watson to talk about change, especially when it comes to land use and urban redevelopment, how to manage that.
Well, one of the things that's most important in change is communications. And this is something that I've observed for a long time with our city is that change management and change communications are specialized crafts, actually. And we have none of our communications team that works at the City of Edmonton that's skilled in this practice. And that is how we are able to describe the benefits of all of the work that the city does. And so I'm very interested in working with the city manager to really help understand that as we constantly evolve our city and specifically even do development in some of our older neighborhoods, we really need to help citizens understand why this work is important, what specifically it's going to entail, what their experience will, so that they can understand what's happening. It's not going to bring everyone on board, but at least they will have clear communications around the from and the to.
Thank you. Okay, next we'll go to Kim Krischel.
Well, certainly from my past experience being on council, leadership is critical at the top. And when I was a councillor, I went into my ward when we had infill developments that were more contentious, and I would talk to the community. I believe that you need to get out there and talk about why we are doing development. But I think today, most Edmontonians recognize that, you know, the larger that we're developing out, the more challenging it can be, and that we need to utilize our existing infrastructure, especially given that we have spent a lot of money replacing and upgrading the existing infrastructure. I think where I hear a disconnect from the community and where their concerns aren't necessarily always that they're against the development. They want better architecture, or they want a respecting of how that development is going to happen when it's really adjacent to their particular property. And so I think that that's where some of the conflict happens. And I think that what we need to do is work with the infill developers, and we need to work with the city to do a better job of making sure that people feel that they're heard, and that when we do the infill development, that there's respect to those neighbors. And I know what I'm talking about because I got to experience it. I do have two skinny homes that were built next to my house, and we were active in working with the developers to make it a better outcome. And I got to experience some of the challenges, but I also was supportive of the development. So I think that's what we need to do there. In terms of missing middles, which we have gaps in infill, we have a lot of land that the city needs to look at, Blatchford being one of them, that is a challenge right now in terms of it's not meeting the targets expected. So clearly infill developers can play a role there. I feel that we need to do a better job of working with both the development industry and the city on streamlining our processes so it's easier to get permits and you don't have such a lag in terms of being able to get into the ground, which can affect businesses, especially because of COVID.
Thank
so
you.
I think there's a number of things we can do. Thank you
for your answer. Next, we'll go over to Michael Oshry. Same question.
You know, change is difficult in most circumstances for a lot of people, and you know we've got to manage that as a city. And we've had some challenges when the infill sort of really started going back when I was on city council. You know, the city did make some mistakes. They didn't monitor some of the poor builders early on, and that created some problems, which then kind of spread out that everyone started worrying that all these infill developments were going to be bad and have a negative influence on their neighborhoods. And so the city didn't handle that very well. I'm not saying everything's bad. They've actually done a really good job in the last couple of years to mitigate that. So I think that's gone a long way. I think we have to do better consultation, and we have to make sure people understand when we are consulting what they can influence and what they can't, because very often they go into these consultations thinking they can change all these decisions, and really they can't. There's some things or decisions are made. There's only specific things now that they can really influence, and we've got to be pretty straight up with it, and we haven't in the past. And I think that would go a long way to add credibility. Really, I find that the skinny issue is really the issue for neighbors, and they really are worried about the aesthetics of their neighborhood and worried that their entire neighborhood is going to turn into all skinny houses, and they've lived in the same neighborhood for 30 years. And I think that's really where the issue is. I hear very few concerns about any other kind of infill, to be blunt. And people are I wouldn't say they're overreacting, but they don't understand the benefits to some degree as far as what it does to our tax base, and what it does to provide more housing choices and options in the community. And they think it's going to affect their entire community, where it really does happen over, this is a decades-long process of renewing some of these housing stocks in the city. And so again, it comes down to me for just better communication and better explanation of how things are happening in their neighborhood, what they can influence, what they can't, and go from there.
Thank you. Now, last on this question is Diana Steele. Oh, I think you're on mute, Diana.
Sorry, I thought I clicked it. Everyone wants to be seen, and they want to feel like they are being heard. And we need to show compassion and empathy. Everyone's already said this answer already, to those who are afraid of change. But we must communicate the benefits to Edmontonians. We have to tell them why this change is good and why it will work in their best interests. As in terms of me as a leader, I'm extremely transparent, probably too transparent at times. I'm openly communicative. I talk to my community and those on social media regularly. And I am confident that Edmontonians will rely on me to tell them the truth about what their best interests are, and that I am 100% always looking out for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that wraps up that question. Our next question is about housing affordability. So this time around, I'd like to know, what's your take on housing affordability? Is it a problem in Edmonton? And if so, what would you do about it? And does infill play a role? So I'll start with Cheryl Watson this time.
Well, if you look at the data, we know that we are the 5th most affordable city from a housing perspective in North America, but that doesn't mean that there are many Edmontonians that can't afford housing, whether it's purchase or rent. And so that definitely is an issue, and it's something that we need to focus on. I think that a big opportunity that we have as a city is one with the amount of land assets that we're sitting on. How can we liberate, sell them, so that we can actually provide more land within the city? And then to that point around zoning, how do we accelerate and upzone as quickly as possible? Because we know we have this city plan vision of 15-minute neighborhoods, but the fact remains is that the zoning situation prevents us from implementing any of it. So that's a huge opportunity for us. We need to accelerate the zoning changes as quickly as possible and make them more agile and able to really create what we need in each neighborhood.
Thank you. Okay, next we'll have Kim Kershaw.
I believe that if we want to have and continue to have a city where everyone can see a life and build a future, especially young people, when it comes to housing affordability, that it's really important that we continue to keep housing affordable in Edmonton. It is an advantage compared to other centers, especially Vancouver and Toronto, but we are a region, so housing affordability is a bit challenging for us because the region can outcompete us. So one of the things that I am calling for is when it comes to our taxes, we are right now leading the country in, unfortunately, in residential homes not being able to pay their taxes. So I am calling for a commitment of a 0 and a 0 and hold the line on property taxes and non-residential taxes, which is how we tax business. And I am also going to be doing a full review of both the non-residential and residential taxes, because since 2013, most Edmontonians have had their residential taxes double, and their non-residential, depending on classification, has in some cases tripled. So we need to continue to be competitive when it comes to that. Part of that is also going to be reviewing spending at the city in order to continue to make sure that we are competitive, especially when we look at the region. And when it comes to ensuring housing affordability, we need to make it easier for home builders to be able to build. And so I've already talked about deemed permitting in different ways we can try to improve our city processes, making sure that building inspections happen quickly. So on the customer service side, I think the city can do better and help people so that we have enough housing stock. And then finally, we need different types of housing available in Edmonton. One of the areas that we don't seem to have a lot of is multi-generational housing, which is needed, especially as we get more and more new immigrants. They're looking for housing options where you can have the whole family, including the grandparents, live in a home together. So those are some of the things that I think we need to look at going forward so that we have a city that people will be attracted to come to and that is affordable to live in. Thank you.
Thank you for your answer. Next, I'll go to Michael Oshry.
Well, thank you. You know, it's really important that we have reasonably priced housing stock and housing choice. You know, some people want to live in the suburbs, some people want to live in a condo downtown, skinny houses, mature neighborhoods, you know, everywhere. We have to let people live where they want to live, but we have to make it as affordable as possible. And we have to make it as easy for the development community within the rules, of course, as I always say, to build these things that people are looking to buy. You know, we can't, as a city, you can't pick and choose what people are going to buy. People are going to buy what they want, and the development community typically builds what the market demands. And so we have to keep that all in mind. But we do have some advantages. I'm going to talk about Blatchford. You know, Blatchford is a disaster, and if we want to fulfill our city's infill goals, all we have to do is develop Blatchford. And you know, the housing prices there, townhouses start at $550. We all know it's not affordable. It's just been a total disaster for the city. So we have to let the private sector step in and develop the 600 hectares. The size of the airport, size of downtown is the airport lot. And so that alone would fulfill our infill goals. And we've just done a disastrous job with that ever since the airport was closed 10 years ago. And then finally, we have to figure out a way for infill developers specifically to make the building easier and less expensive. So it will provide a less expensive option for people. You know, I know a little bit about it because when I left city council, I started an infill financing company. And so that's what we do, is we finance smaller builds. And this is one of the reasons, because there's a lack of financing, and there's just as I alluded to in my earlier comments around permit and the city getting in the way, it's just very expensive to build these infill properties, no matter what type, whether it's skinnies or multi-family. And so we've got to make it as inexpensive as possible and easy as possible for the developers, which then leads to the price point being lower, which would then drive some of the people to choose that as another housing option. Because right now, the biggest challenge with infill is that it's expensive. And so there's a lot of work the city has to do around all these different things. Thank you.
Thank you for your answer. Okay, next we have Diana Steele.
That we don't have enough affordable housing for those who need it. And one idea, as Michael touched on, is to encourage builders to get creative and build affordable homes, but it's probably not as glamorous as a development project and not as profitable, as, of course. But we do need to improve city processes as well, because we know that's holding everybody back a little bit. And then I am in favor of Kim's suggestion, and this is something on my platform as well, which is calling for a review of the taxation system, ensuring that we are competitive, and also holding on a 0% increase as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Last for this question is Amarjeet Sohi.
One of the biggest advantage that we have in Edmonton is our housing affordability. So we need to continue to maintain it. One of the two proposals that I have brought forward is guaranteed timelines for permits and inspections and licenses. I think that will provide more predictability and certainty and will save a lot of money to the people who conduct business in our city. The other one is the creation of the Business Advocate Office, one-stop shop where businesses can go access services, programs. I believe that this office will help us change the culture of this organization from being just a regulator to more of a enabling people to do business. I would love to work with you if I get elected to make Infill more affordable, which is not affordable at this time. I know you have some ideas around some of the barriers you face. I would love to learn about those. I also see affordability in a broader sense. We need to make living affordable in Edmonton, not just housing. So access to public transit is key for that affordability. Access to affordable rec centers, amenities is key to that affordability. If we can reduce people's need by even by one vehicle that they have to buy to get around the city, from having 2-car family to 3-car family, reducing it to 1-car family. That's thousands of dollars in savings that families will realize if they have access to public transit, and how we can reduce other costs. So I look at affordability in a bigger sense, and that's the approach I would like to take, keeping overall city affordable for people to build their lives here.
Thank you very much. Okay, so in the last little bit of time that we have left, I'm going to squeeze in another question. It's going to be a choose your own adventure. So I'll give you 3 options. You can choose which question that you answer. And I'm going to give you 90 seconds this time so that we can all be out by 1. So your option 1 is, what do you think are barriers to infill development and how might we address them? Option 2 is, what do you consider to be the top policy direction in city plan? How will you support the implementation of that policy? And option 3 is, what would you do to help us see more growth in medium scale housing, sometimes referred to as the missing middle? I will start with Kim Krischel.
Well, I'll tackle that last one, the missing middle. I do think that the city has a number of different areas where we can look at infill development and work with the infill developers, and I would do so if elected as mayor. I think that obvious infill development would be the Blatchford development. I would like us to work with the private sector, given the challenges with that development. I would like to see it still be potential green with clean technology, but I recognize that the private sector would bring opportunity there. I see opportunity for more medium-sized development on a number of parcels throughout the city of Edmonton where it makes sense. We have a lot of burgeoning on RF3 units where you already have zoning that you can do up to a triplex. I think that, that makes sense for corner lot locations, and that we need to work on that. But at the same time, the thing that I would be pushing back for with the infill development industry that I've heard the community would be looking for is, what's the trade-off in terms of architecture and opportunity there? Because look is what seems to be the biggest concern from a lot of people. It's not necessarily everything that comes along with density. It's oftentimes the issues around the look of the neighborhood and how can that infill development be sensitive to it. I think that with some of the affordable housing needs that we have in the city, there is a lot of opportunity to work with infill developers in order to provide housing that is available for those that are marginalized and at risk. With that, I'm out of time. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, next I'll go to Michael Oshry. Again, it was barriers to infill development, top policy direction in city plan, or how could we see more growth in medium scale housing?
I'll tackle the barriers one first. But I will say right off the bat, the Blatchford development, of which I've been the candidate to push to move the city into privatizing that and letting the private sector lead the way and keep the same environmental vision. I got to say, I just find Kim's comment quite rich because she was the one who closed the airport, put the public sector, the city as the lead developer, and then sat on the advisory board for a few years after she left council. And now to say that agreeing that it should be a private sector is pretty rich. But moving on to the barriers, the issues we have are capital. We need to drive some investment into our city. And so whether it's in the infill development community or elsewhere, we've got to really get some investment into our community. There's just been a lack of capital in a variety of different businesses. And so that's a really big thing. And I know it's a big issue for a lot of the developers in the city as well. I'll talk again about the permitting, and we've got to get the city out of the way and get the permitting done as quick and as efficiently as possible. Because right now it's just taken forever to get anything done. And the city doesn't understand the time cost of money here for the development community. And if something gets delayed by a month or 2 or 6 or a week, it just adds up to the cost of the project. It makes it pretty inefficient. And then finally, I keep talking about getting the city out of the way. I'm a free market person, and the market really does decide a lot of these housing choices. And it's really tough for the city government, I think. I don't think it's the city's government place to try to determine what kind of housing goes where and how many bedrooms and all these kind of rules that I know have come back into rezoning applications. And so
I have to ask you to wrap it up.
That was 90 seconds. Sorry. So we have to get out of the way and let the market decide. Thank you very much, Chelsea.
Thank you very much. Sorry, we're just in a race against time here. So Diana, I'll go over to you.
I'll be quick. One idea might be for the city to offer incentives of some kind to builders who want to increase housing density near our social hubs and our transportation corridors, those types of things. And then that's when where they can build the types of homes that the middle is demanding. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Amarjeet Sohi, you're up next.
So Chelsea, all these 3 issues are interconnected, as city building is a very complicated and a process, right? So it's hard to separate one from the other, but I will pick the barriers and barriers to infill. I heard Mariah's interview and with Speaking Municipality podcast. And I was very impressed by some of the ideas that are coming out of the leadership that you're providing in making infill more affordable and removing those barriers. And that is about community consultation and how we do it better. It is about how we reduce upfront cost. There are a lot of small infill developers don't have the capacity to provide. And how we make sure that the aesthetics of the infill is meeting the character and the uniqueness of the neighborhoods where infill is being developed. I think I'm in a very unique position to lead that kind of work because of my collaborative approach and my deep connections to communities and listening to people very carefully, and then trying to resolve the issues in a way that both parties can come together. I think that's where we need to go. We're all Edmontonians. We want to build a great city. We all want to live in an exciting place, and we all make sure that we're working together.
Thank you so much for that answer. Now, Cheryl Watson, you have 90 seconds.
Well, I have been listening to the community as well, and clearly costs we know are a huge barrier, and there's all of the unpredictability that goes along with infill. And I heard recently, I think a member of the community just said it keeps getting worse, and something like continuous duck bites, I think was what I heard about it. And so that's why we proposed the waiving the infill development fees, because we do recognize the high price of infill. The other thing I would say is the bureaucracy. And so one of the ideas that I floated recently around how we do our permitting right now is other cities have actually assigned their permitting responsibilities to industry. So they have taken it right out of the bureaucracy, and they've assigned it to architects and engineers who actually understand more of the issues. And so I think that the more that we can lean into industry experts in these areas, listening to both your recommendations and then as well allowing you to play a bigger role in the execution of the work would be critically important.
Thank you very much. So that brings us to a conclusion. We really appreciate the time that you took, all of you, to be with us here today and to share your perspectives. Again, we had Kim Crushell, Michael Oshry, Diana Steele, Amarjeet Sohi, and Cheryl Watson. For all of you listening in, our municipal election is right around the corner here on Monday, October 18th. So make sure you go out and vote. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mariah.
Yes, I just want to say thank you so much for spending your lunch hour with us. We know how busy it is in the last week leading up to the election, and we're so excited that everyone who joined in today is pretty engaged and excited to hear from all of you. Infill is about residential, it's about commercial, it's about building communities with options for all as you age, as you grow into new stages of your family. And I really appreciate everyone who joined us here today. As we grow into a new city and new phases and you'd like to learn more about Infill, you can always reach out to IDEA. We're willing to have those conversations. And good luck to all of our candidates. Have a great weekend. Bye.